are Windows XP, a nostalgic childhood memory for many people of my age. But can you game on a really old Windows XP laptop in 2020? But before we get started, I'd like to tell you that today's video is sponsored by me. Just kidding, today's video isn't sponsored, but I'd really appreciate it if you liked the videos, if you subscribed, and maybe check me out on Twitter. Anyway, let's get started. Some of you may recognize this laptop from a video I made close to 3 years ago. This is a Toshiba Tecra M5 that cost me $10. Since I made that video, I swapped out the hard disk for an inexpensive SSD. This laptop has a surprising 256 megabytes of discrete video memory, so I should definitely be able to play some newer games on it. The thermal paste in this laptop is about 14 years old, and I really think we should replace it before we begin. The heat that comes out of that air vent is really hot. To help me disassemble this laptop, I'm following an iFixit tutorial. Since it's not super obvious how you're supposed to separate the top and bottom halves of this machine. Many small Phillips head screws hold it together. To disconnect the ribbon cable, I had to pry open this plastic cover. With the keyboard removed, I could now separate the two halves of the laptop. I had to be careful as there was a connector I had to dislodge, and this antenna wire was not part of the iFixit tutorial, so I'm going to leave it connected. Now we get our first look at the cooling system inside. The CPU and GPU share the same fan, but have separate heat pipes and cooling fins. Considering the age of this laptop, the thermal paste wasn't too bad. It definitely needs replacing, but I've seen paste that's literally like powder come off of far newer MacBooks. The NVIDIA graphics chip we have here is a Quadro NVS 110M, which is definitely very dated in 2020. But in 2006, having 256 megabytes of video memory in a laptop was quite uncommon. Using some isopropyl alcohol, I wiped the heatsinks clean. It always feels very satisfying wiping all that old paste away. I gave the internals a dust out, and now we can apply some fresh thermal paste. This will spread thinly over the processor die when the cooler is screwed back in place. It's good to see that this laptop has a decent sized fan. With some trial and error, I eventually got all of the connectors to line up. Getting access to the internals definitely took some time. However, it wasn't as difficult as I expected. Last of all, the numerous screws could be put back in place. Before we give this laptop a quick cleaning, I'd like to give a big thank you to Persistos for sending me over this little eucalyptus oil care package. They did send it over a few weeks ago and I finally opened the box, and thank you very much for doing that, it is much appreciated. With a bit of eucalyptus oil, I began wiping it down. If you ever buy a second-hand laptop, I'd highly recommend giving it a clean with an antibacterial solution. Thankfully, the display was still pretty clean from when I used it last back in 2017. Some lens cleaning solution on a microfiber cloth works great to remove any smudges. It's also worth cleaning the outside of a laptop as well. Now all I've got to do is set this machine up for some gaming. Surprisingly, Windows XP works completely fine with this modern Logitech G29 racing wheel. I've also chosen to use a pair of really old Philips speakers, which sound surprisingly good for their size. This setup is definitely functional and somewhat janky, but it does work. Since the V8 Supercars has been postponed this year, why don't we take a trip around the Adelaide Street circuit in EA's V8 Challenge released back in 2002.
Here we are with race number 1 of the Adelaide 500. And it's lights out here at Adelaide. Looks like we've got some traffic going into the chicane. Nathan Sivewright in a better electrical Ford Falcon jumps up to 11th from 14th position. Coming into turn 4, he jumps up another 3 more positions. Larry Perkins is really feeling the pressure as that better electrical Ford Falcon closes the gap. Whoa, and Jason Bright nearly loses it into the fence. Coming up to the final corner, and Nathan locks up. He's in the grass. Oh, it's all over for him now. He really is a terrible driver.
The next game is called Hover, and originally came as a freebie on the Windows 95 install disk. It's even more surprising that it works really well with this modern racing wheel. I remember having lots of fun playing this game back on this computer. Another game that still works great in Windows XP is Minecraft. With the render distance set to 8, this old laptop maintains about 70 frames per second, with occasional pauses for some reason. I'm guessing it's because the game is still generating new chunks. With the highest graphical settings selected, Motocross Madness 2 runs smooth as butter. This is a game I've always had trouble running on Windows 10. It is considered abandonware now, so you can freely download it online. While I'd like to play some Steam games, sadly it's not supported on Windows XP anymore. That also rules out my copy of Modern Warfare 3, which requires Steam to run. Another childhood favourite of mine is RuneScape, which I'm pleased to say works great on this system. I first started playing this back in 2007 on our family's Windows XP computer. Another classic game is Star Wars Battlefront 2, the original one. For a 2005 release, the graphics still hold up really well and it runs smoothly on this laptop, even at high settings. This copy of Grand Theft Auto 3 was only $2 from cash converters. Cranking the graphical settings as high as they'll go gets great results. This is still a good looking game, especially considering it's nearly 19 years old. Far Cry is a visually impressive game. Running at the native resolution and with the settings on medium, the frame rate is consistent. But there are a number of technical problems that arise. Missing sound effects, frequent pauses, and disappearing ground textures. Not a good experience on this laptop. Moving on to an older title, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 is still a lot of fun. This is a title I've had issues with running on modern hardware and Windows 10. I got my copy of this game with an old IBM ThinkPad I bought from a local market back in 2006. It doesn't get much better than a game where you can skate as Spider-Man. Next up, we've got the Age of Empires Collector's Edition, which features the first and second games with their respective expansion packs. Back in primary school, quite a few people would run multiplayer matches during lunchtimes. Many good times were had. Why on earth did Microsoft think the front cover was a good place to stick the authenticity card? We're going back even further to 1995. Microsoft Golf is a fun little simulation game where, you guessed it, get to play golf.
That's on the short stuff.
Since Windows XP isn't based on the MS-DOS kernel, old DOS games can only be run in Windows XP itself and not from MS-DOS on startup. The original Duke Nukem and its sound effects ran perfectly on this machine. The graphics scaled up fine on this 1024x768 display panel. Alien Carnage is one of the first games I ever played on a computer. Aside from the audio issues, it plays very good. It's now available for free online. It's definitely worth giving a shot. Another childhood favourite of mine is Commander Keen. I remember that my grandpa gave me this on a floppy disk many years ago. It's another DOS game that runs great on this laptop.
Starting off with a dab of eucalyptus.
While Google Chrome is no longer supported on Windows XP, it does seem to work. Even full HD YouTube playback was smooth. Still very much doable on this computer. If you ever used Windows XP as a kid, there's a 100% chance you drew some masterpieces in Paint. I wish I still had some of the ones I drew many years ago. To me, Windows XP wasn't just an operating system, it truly was an experience. Even just looking at the box brings back so many great memories. Oh, and this has to be one of the coolest installation CDs ever. While no longer supported and definitely quite vulnerable, Windows XP is a great platform for playing lots of old games. I had a lot of fun reliving a few childhood memories and using Windows XP once again. Don't forget to wash your hands. I hope you've enjoyed this video and I'll see you next time. Have a good one.